thank you for standing by. The conference will begin momentarily. Until such time, you will continue to hear music. Thank you, and please continue to stand by. Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode for today's conference. During the discussion, we will have question and answer sessions, at which point, if you'd like to ask a question, please dial star and then 1. This call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this point. Now, I will turn the meeting over to your host, Abby Capobianco. You may now begin the conference, Abby.
Hello, and welcome to this media briefing on the FDA's additional actions regarding booster doses of COVID-19 vaccines. I'm Abby Capobianco with the FDA's Office of Media Affairs. In a moment, I will turn it over to Acting FDA Commissioner Dr. Janet Woodcock for opening remarks. Following Dr. Woodcock, Dr. Peter Marks, Director of the FDA Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, will also provide brief remarks. After the remarks, we will then move to the question and answer portion of the call. Reporters on the phone will be in a listen-only mode until we open the call up for questions. As a reminder, this audio call is being recorded and live streamed on the FDA's YouTube channel. When asking a question, please state your name and affiliation. Also, please ensure questions pertain to today's announcement and limit yourself to one question so we can get to as many as possible. With that, I will now turn the call over to Acting FDA Commissioner Dr. Woodcock.
Thank you, Abby, and thank all of you for joining us this evening. Today, the FDA has taken additional steps to expand the use of COVID-19 vaccination in the United States. Today's actions reflect our ongoing commitment to public health as we continue to address the ongoing pandemic. Well, the science continues to show that vaccination is the safest and most effective way to prevent COVID-19, including the most serious consequences of the disease, including hospitalization and death. While the number of COVID-19 cases, including hospitalization and death, continues to trend downward, that does not mean we should stop being vigilant. Vaccination and public masking in high-risk settings continue to represent the best way to effectively put this pandemic behind us. To date, the currently available data suggests waning immunity in some populations of fully vaccinated people, and the availability of these authorized boosters is important for continued protection against COVID-19 disease. The actions we've taken today help address this waning immunity. Now, all of these actions will be further discussed and evaluated by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC's, advisory committee tomorrow. Now, let me briefly walk you through today's actions. First, the agency amended the Moderna COVID-19 Vaccine Emergency Use Authorization, or EUA, to allow for the use of a booster dose for eligible populations, including those 65 and older, those at high risk of COVID-19, and those with frequent institutional or occupational exposure to the virus causing COVID-19 at 6 months after individuals complete their primary 2-dose series. The agency also amended the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 EUA with a minor update to the booster authorization that aligns the language on institutional occupational exposure to be similar to today's Moderna authorization language. The agency has also amended the Janssen, also known as the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 Vaccine EUA, to allow the use of a booster dose for individuals 18 years and older 2 months after they receive their first dose. Finally, the agency has authorized the use of all 3 authorized vaccines as a heterologous, or vernacularly called mix and match booster, following vaccination with any currently available COVID-19 vaccine given as a primary series. Dr. Marks will walk through the details of that decision. The FDA's evaluation of all these EUA requests included a review of each manufacturer's trial data by FDA scientific and medical experts and input from the agency's advisory committee of independent scientific and medical experts. The FDA recognizes that vaccines are one of our greatest tools in the fight against the pandemic, and ensuring the availability of boosters for those who need them is one of our highest priorities. So thank you, and I will now turn to Dr. Marks to discuss more about the FDA's process for approving these boosters. Dr. Marks.
Thank you, Dr. Woodcock. It's a pleasure to join you all today. I'd like to focus my comments on a topic that we know the public continues to be very interested in, and that's our evaluation of the use of heterologous or mix and match boosters for the FDA authorized or approved COVID-19 vaccines. The agency considered data submitted from a clinical trial that was sponsored by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and our advisory committee's discussion of those data, as well as our own evaluation of the available evidence. Based on the totality of the scientific evidence, the FDA has determined that the known and potential benefits of the use of a single heterologous booster dose of available vaccines outweigh the known and potential risks of their use in eligible populations. So a single booster dose of any of the available COVID-19 vaccines may be administered as a booster dose following completion of the primary vaccination series with a different authorized or approved COVID-19 vaccine. And the eligible population and dosing interval for a heterologous booster dose are the same as those authorized for a booster dose of the vaccine used for primary vaccination. For example, the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine recipients 18 years of age and older may receive a single booster dose of Janssen COVID-19 vaccine, and the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine or a half dose of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine at least 2 months after receiving their Janssen COVID-19 vaccine primary vaccination. As another example, a Moderna COVID-19 vaccine and Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine recipients falling into one of the eligible categories for boosters, including those 65 years of age and older, 18 through 64 years of age at high risk of severe COVID-19, and 18 through 64 years of age with frequent institutional or occupational exposure to SARS coronavirus 2 may receive a half dose of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine as a booster, or a full dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine or Janssen COVID-19 vaccine as a booster at least 6 months after completing their primary vaccination. So we recognize that healthcare providers and COVID-19 vaccine recipients will have questions about booster doses, and the individual fact sheets for each available vaccine provide relevant information for healthcare providers and the vaccine recipients. The agency encourages healthcare providers to also follow the recommendations that will be provided by the CDC following a meeting of their advisory committee on immunization practices tomorrow, and formal recommendations that will be signed by the CDC director. Detailed information on the agency's evaluation supporting all of today's EUA amendments can be found on our press release on these actions and on the FDA website. Allowing for booster doses in the populations that need them most at this time marks another important step in our collective effort to bring the COVID-19 pandemic to a close. We know that working together will succeed in this goal. I'd now like to turn the press conference back over to the moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Woodcock and Dr. Marks. At this time, we will begin the question and answer portion of the press conference. As a reminder, this call is being recorded. When asking a question, please state your name and affiliation. Also, please ensure questions pertain to today's announcement and limit yourself to one question so we can get to as many questions as possible. Operator will take the first question, please.
Great, thank you, speakers. And just a reminder for participants out there, to ask a question, please dial *1 now. Please make sure to record your name clearly when prompted. To cancel that request, press *2. One moment, please, as we wait to open up the questions here. All right, and our first question comes from Michael Ehrman. Michael, go ahead, please.
Hi, it's Mike Ehrman from Reuters. Just wondering practically how you expect mix and match will work. Will people get a choice at the counter? And based on the NIAID study, is there a preferred booster that people should want?
This is Janet Woodcock. We would expect many people will continue to get the same series that they had already received. However, I'll turn it over to Dr. Marks to discuss this in more detail.
Thanks very much. So, as Dr. Woodcock said, many may choose or elect to get the same vaccine that they received. However, in some situations, there may be an issue with availability, or there may be medical considerations that a provider may decide upon to recommend for a given individual. And individuals should be encouraged to speak with their providers if they have concerns. So that's at least from the FDA perspective, and I think we will have to see also what comes out of discussion at the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices from CDC, which will meet tomorrow.
Agree. And we do not have preferential recommendations on boosters in our materials.
Operator, we'll take the next question, please.
All right, great. Thank you. And our next question comes from Meg Terrell with CNBC. Meg, go ahead, please.
Well, thanks so much. I was just wondering if you could walk through the decision-making around allowing, the broad mix and match flexibility with the half dose of Moderna. Are there any data about getting a J&J and then a half dose Moderna boost, or a Pfizer and a half dose Moderna boost? Because the NIAID study only looked, at least from the antibody results we saw last week, at 100 micrograms. Is that right?
That's
correct. Dr. Marks, you may want to take this question.
Yeah. So thanks very much. So you point out something that's very much correct, and you may have noted that at our advisory committee meeting, what may have been mentioned that this lower dose, 50 microgram dose of the Moderna vaccine is being studied with the various other vaccines at this time. In the case of our decision today, it was based on multiple lines of evidence, which all point to an adequate response, booster response of the other vaccines to the Moderna 50 microgram vaccine. And given that the booster recommendation for use with Moderna was 50 micrograms, it could have led to a lot of confusion to have a different booster recommendation for other vaccines. So as you'll see in the data that will be posted, the immune response to 50 micrograms is a little over 3/4 of that to a full 100 microgram dose when looked at the same time point that we were looking at for the other boosters. And so that, in combination with other lines of evidence, made us feel comfortable taking this action today.
Operator, we'll take the next question, please.
All right, great. Thank you. And our next question comes from Matt Perrone with the Associated Press. Matt, go ahead, please.
Week, Dr. Marks laid out, some of the potentially serious risks of even mild to moderate COVID infections, talking about blood clots, long COVID. Given that and given, frankly, the excess supply of vaccines in the U.S., why not lower eligibility, lower this down, whether it's 40, 50, or is that something that's going to take more meetings, more EUAs? What has to happen?
This is Janet Woodcock. We are continuing to very actively monitor the situation in the United States and the breakthrough infections and waning immunity in different populations. So it's a very dynamic situation. We're watching it extremely carefully, and we'll take appropriate action to protect the public should it be necessary. So we're looking at that very closely.
Operator, we'll take the next question, please.
All right, great. Thank you. And our next question comes from Ann Flaherty with ABC News. Ann, go ahead. Your line is now open.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Dr. Marks, are you interested in considering expanding boosters for Moderna and Pfizer recipients as young as 40 without health conditions or at-risk jobs? Is that something that you would be interested in looking at?
So, of course, we're going to continue to look at all the data here. And I think, as was presented at our advisory committee and was discussed, there is evidence to suggest potentially that lowering the age of those eligible for boosters may make sense in the future, something we're looking at closely. The nice thing about our EUA authority is that we are relatively nimble, and it is something that can happen as soon as we see and feel that we need to take that action. And whether that will be, the exact age of that that we take will be based on what we see in terms of the emerging situation, which is quite dynamic right now, because we continue to see the reports of new variants coming up, and we're also seeing changes in the epidemiology of COVID-19 in our country right now, with new hotspots coming up even as certain places die down. So we, as Dr. Woodcock already mentioned, are watching this very, very closely and will take action as appropriate to make sure that the maximal protection is provided to the population, potentially by the availability of boosters.
Operator, next question, please.
Our next question comes from Peter Loftus with the Wall Street Journal. Peter, go ahead, please.
Hi, thanks. I was wondering if you can say whether you found that the risk of myocarditis and pericarditis is any different after the boosters of the mRNA vaccines versus the primary series of those vaccines.
I'll have Dr. Marks answer that question, since he's very close to these data.
So thanks very much. Actually, the data presented at the advisory committee actually was quite positive in this regard, or I shouldn't say positive, quite revealing. Sorry, I strike that word positive. It was quite revealing in this regard, in that the third doses of the vaccine given several months after the initial two for the mRNA vaccine there, Pfizer, did not appear to be associated with any greater incidence of myocarditis than the second dose. And in fact, the profile of myocarditis, pericarditis looked much more like the first dose. And if you look globally at some of the evidence, other emerging evidence, that seems to be a trend. So it may be that the additional time between doses, again, this is not definitive, but it may be the additional time helps reduce that risk of myocarditis.
Operator, next question, please.
Our next question comes from Lauren Gardner with Politico. Go ahead, Lauren.
Hi, thanks. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit more about how you're going to message the various eligibilities here for boosters, given that while Moderna and Pfizer are the same, J&J is for anybody who got it, and just the litany of different conditions that may apply for someone to be eligible for a booster. Just how are you planning to work through that, at least initially, confusing messaging in the coming weeks as people speak these out?
Yes, well, first of all, we'll have the CDC and the ACIP discussing these issues as well. And so we aren't quite done with this process and see what the overall final recommendations are, although we've been working very closely with the CDC on this. We've also been working very closely with the HHS operation that will be, sending these out. And, they're going to make sure that the providers have as much information as possible. that is in a clear way, because yes, it could be confusing. I think it'll be more confusing probably for the public than for the pharmacists and the other providers. We think we should be able to manage this. Dr. Marks, other thoughts?
No, I think you've gotten it pretty nicely. I think we already have seen some development of some materials like charts that should help explain this about, because it is, although it is not simple, it also is not it's not utterly hopelessly complex, and so hopefully with some clear illustrations it will be somewhat more accessible what's going on here.
Right. Given the difference in the vaccines and their regimens, we have tried to keep this as uniform as possible, but it was not possible to have it totally uniform because we're dealing with different vaccines that had different series.
Operator, we'll take the next question, please.
Our next question comes from Sharon Lafayette with the New York Times. Sharon, your line is now open. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My question is for Dr. Woodcock and Dr. Marks. Can you explain who should be making the decision about whether to switch to another vaccine to boost? Is it purely patient choice, or do you expect the provider to make a recommendation?
We feel that if patients have questions, they should consult with perhaps their physician or another provider. We wanted to provide a lot of flexibility because some people don't know what vaccine they got in certain circumstances. There are people who don't know. There are people who do not want to get the same vaccine as they got before because they had some sort of reaction. It is very important that everyone in these eligible groups get boosted. But we would expect that many folk will continue with the same regimen that they started with. Dr. Marks, other thoughts?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think if people have concerns, they should ask their providers, and there might be reasons that an individual, a provider, might decide to recommend a different booster based on side effects that we're seeing, or based on that individual provider's assessment of the totality of the evidence available as applied to that individual.
Operator, we'll take the next question, please.
Thank you. And our next question comes from Leanne Wink with CBS News. Leanne, your line is now open. Go ahead, please.
Thanks very much. I just wonder if we could do a reality check on how this is going to work in practice. As many of us have heard that people are getting boosters on their own, is there a requirement that the provider checks the eligibility based on these guidelines? Or if someone feels vulnerable, should they and are they able to go get a booster just because they want it?
Dr. Marks, do you want to describe?
Yeah, so I can start with this, which is that there are criteria that will be present for receiving boosters, and I'm already aware of pharmacies that have developed checklists. They don't necessarily require some medical record verification, but they're taking people at their word that they fall into one of the categories, and I'd assume that that's what we're going to be doing here again, which is that people will go to their pharmacy or healthcare provider, and they will potentially answer some questions, and then it will be determined about whether they will be eligible for a booster. In some cases, this is being done as phone pre-screening by pharmacies before they make the appointment to see whether people fall into the categories that are eligible for boosters. That's how it works already for the Pfizer-BioNTech that was recently authorized for this, and that's how I will assume it will work for both the Janssen and the Moderna as those boosters come out too.
Operator, we'll take the next question, please.
Our next question comes from Helen Bronswell with Stats. Go ahead, Helen.
Thank you very much for taking my question. The evidence on heterologous boosting suggests that not all combinations work as well as others, and that giving some things first may be important. I'm wondering why FDA refrained from giving people any direction on, which booster they should get after their primary series.
Dr. Woodcock, I'm happy to jump into that one.
Okay. Well, I was going to say we
don't
have any real clinical effectiveness data on this question. You're talking about antibody responses, and we really don't know the connection between that and actually how well protected somebody is. Dr. Marks, go ahead.
No, exactly. I was going to echo. So really, what we're looking at here are short-term immune responses. That's not to discourage people from getting these boosters. It's just that what one needs to understand is that there are two major components to the immune response. One is how we make antibodies, and the other is how a type of immune cell called our T cells gives us long-term memory that will help protect us over a longer period of time. And it is indeed possible that something that does not give you as high a level of the antibodies up front may protect you for a longer period of time or more robustly later on. So because we don't have those data right now, I think we just have to be, we can't commit, we have to be non-committal about what is the best. And we have to simply say that any one of these combinations is reasonable. And something I would say, though, that is just something to just think about is that in many ways, as we move to deal with this as an infectious disease that we have to deal with, being able to interchange these vaccines is a good thing. It's like what we do with flu vaccine. Most people don't know what brand flu vaccine they received, and although they're somewhat more standardized perhaps, this is something that is probably a good next step for us to be able to have the flexibility that people can get vaccinated easily, particularly in vaccination campaigns for institutions where it might be hard to go patient by patient and figure out what they received 6 or 8 months ago.
Operator, we have time for one last question.
All right, thank you. And now our next and last question comes from Maggie Fox with CNN. Maggie, go ahead, please.
Thanks so much. And Dr. Marks, you just touched on my question, which is, it makes it so much easier when you can have any vaccine. So why keep this very complicated protocol where you have to be 65 or older or 18 or older and, have all these various risk factors? Why not just simplify the regimen so it's simple for everyone?
So thanks for the question. I think we may get there. Okay, I can't promise that we will, but because that's not the nature of things. We're data driven, but we may well get there. It's a matter of having the data and ensuring that when we make that decision, the benefits clearly outweigh the risks throughout the population. Somebody on this call already mentioned the word myocarditis, and so males 18 to 30, for instance, are at somewhat higher risk for this. And we want to make sure that if we deploy the boosters in all of the age ranges, that we truly are making a benefit outweigh any risk. And so we will not hesitate to drop this age range as we see that benefit clearly outweighs the risk. And because of the EUA authorities that we have, we can do that in a relatively quick amount of time. And it's been known to happen that we can modify emergency use authorizations within weeks of previously doing things to them, for that matter, within days. So that's how we will deal with this. We will be nimble to address the public health crisis that we're in.
Right. Yeah, this is Janet Woodcock. Yeah, we still have to weigh simplicity and, versus the benefit risk and make sure that the populations receiving this are going to benefit. So that's where we are with this.
This concludes today's FDA press conference. A replay will be available on FDA's YouTube page. If you have follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to contact the FDA press office at fdaoma@fda.hhs.gov. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.